In this video, I'm going to show you how you can make this black walnut end table out of one single board, pinned at the top with brass dowels. The first thing you're going to do is get a piece of 1/2-inch MDF board and make a template out of it that measures 16.5 by 16. Then you're going to draw the curve, measuring in about 1 inch to the center, either using French curves or, for that matter, you could even use a garden hose. The key thing is that you make it consistent on both sides to give it uniformity. Then you're going to use a drum sander to sand right up to the line and not over. After that, you'll get a piece of 9 foot long by 9 1/4 wide by 1 inch thick piece of walnut. From there, you're going to cut 6 separate pieces, 4 measuring 16.5 and 2 measuring 18 inches. Another note, you're probably going to want to also get a board that's finished on all 4 sides to save yourself a lot of work in the long run. Next thing you'll do is take all 3 pairs and put them together edge to edge using glue and dowels, making sure the grains, one faces up and one faces down to prevent wood movement later on. Here I'm using the Dowmax dowel jig because it does absolutely precise holes, and it's a great tool and it's highly recommended. I put 3 dowels in each piece, and here you can see I'm using the spacing jig, and then I glued all the dowels in, glued all the faces, clamped it together, and let it dry. Then you'll take your template and put it on top of the 16.5-inch wide pieces and trace it on, ready to remove all the material that's outside of your line. The key here is removing all the material up to the line, but make sure you do not go over, because you're going to remove that with a flush cut routing bit. I used an old school jigsaw to cut out the curve, and because it didn't have a vacuum port, I actually took this battery operated blower and locked the trigger in so I didn't lose the line. Once everything is cut out, you're ready to put the template on top of your piece, and then your piece will be slightly overhanging the template around the entire thing. And here we use the double-sided woodworking tape to hold it in place. The woodworking tape has exceptional hold, so you don't need too much of it, because after the fact, you're going to have to take it off, and you don't want to battle with it too much. Now you're going to use your flush cut routing bit, set at a depth where the ball bearing will start to ride the MDF template. It's going to make a nice clean edge. Now at your entry and your exit points, you're going to want to ease in so you don't have any blowout. On this one, I got a tiny little bit, but it was going to be hidden by the tabletop, so it wasn't a big deal, but just want to pass that along. The other thing I had to do was do it in a couple of passes, because I don't know if you can notice, but at the top, I have a little lip up there because the bit that I had couldn't do it in one pass, so I just had to raise up the bit slightly to do it in a couple of passes. Now, if you notice in the beginning, the base is in the X or a cross shape, so you're going to need to take one of the base pieces and you're going to find the center of it, and you're going to measure a 1/2 inch from either side or use a scrap piece of wood to represent what you're going to remove so you can make this nice X base that's even on both sides. Everything that's in between the 2 drawn lines is going to be removed with a table saw. Now, this is where it's critical that your table saw is perfectly 90 degrees to get a nice flush cut, as you can see right there. Find the center of each piece, put it in a vise, and you're ready to start drilling. Here I'm using an old school portable drill press, which is absolutely critical for this, and it's a great tool and highly recommended. It's like $110. It's dirt cheap and works great. Then you drill 3 3/8 holes into the center and into the adjoining piece about 2.5 inches, keeping in mind that both pieces will be married into the same spot. And using the same exact 3 holes, you're going to do the same thing to the other leg. Now you're ready to make the tabletop out of the remaining 18-inch pieces. Here I am finding the center, getting ready to attach my circle cutting jig. And I believe it measured about 17.5 inches for the top. So you're going to find the center and then slowly cut out your tabletop. After that, I rounded over the curved sections with a 1/2 inch roundover bit. And then on the tabletop, I put a 15-degree bevel on the top, and then I flipped it over, and on the bottom, I just did a 1/8 inch roundover just to soften up the edges and to give it a nice appealing look. From there, you're ready to get the piece ready for sanding. And I went from about 80 grit all the way to about 120 grit because I'm going to put a hard wax finish on this, and that's about what they recommend for that. This is one of the main reasons I chose a board that was finished on all 4 sides to start the project with, just because it saves so much in assembling it and sanding it in the end. Now you're ready to glue up the pieces together, and this is where it's critical. On the 2 cut pieces, you're going to place the dowels and glue them in, but each dowel cannot stick out more than a 1/2 inch because it's going to marry into the center piece that's 1 inch thick. So you want 1/2 inch from one leg and 1/2 inch from the other leg, and then you're going to be ready to clamp it up. Now to clamp it up, I took a couple of 2x4s with a piece of foam and I raised it up in the air in order to get the bar clamp underneath. And as you can see here, I have 1 bar clamp underneath and 1 on top, and I face glued everything and squeezed them as tight as I could and let it dry up, and wiped away any of the glue that was sticking out as I squeezed it together. Here I'm transferring the center of each leg to the tabletop, and I'm just doing it by eye. And the reason I'm doing it is so I can draw 2 intersecting lines on the tabletop, so whereas later I'll be able to drill down and put the brass dowels in. Now I'm going to draw the 2 intersecting lines on the top, and then from each edge, 3 inches in, I'm going to make 4 cross points that's going to represent where the dowels are going to be pinned into the top of the table. Now the way I decided to put this tabletop on is a little bit unconventional. I decided to just glue it first and then drill the dowels in after the glue dried. And the way I did it was line up those crosshairs with each leg. I put plenty of glue on the top, and what I didn't show here, because I didn't have video of it, is to hold the tabletop on nice is I put probably a couple of 100 pounds of weight on top just to hold it in place and to compress it nicely. Now once all the glue is dried up, those 4 crosshairs that you made on the top, you'll now drill to a depth of about 2.5 inches, ready to receive the brass dowel pins that you're going to epoxy in later. One thing to note here is that you should definitely check that your portable drill press is set exactly at 90 degrees when you're doing these holes, and that you have a nice, sharp, brand new bit. Start each hole very slowly as to prevent any blowout, and then you can ramp the speed up as you're going deeper in. After the 4 holes are drilled, you're ready to prep the dowels and get ready for your final assembly. I picked up the dowels off of Amazon, and you only need 2 of them. They're 3/8 by 4 inches long. And I cut them in half, and then I put score marks in each of the dowels so they can hold the epoxy as it goes in and give it that nice fit. And then the other thing I did was tapered the ends on the bench grinder, just so when I had to do my assembly, they just went in much easier. For the epoxy, I just went with 5-minute JB Weld, And as you can see, I taped around the holes just so I didn't have to do so much sanding later. And this is the critical point right here. As you're hammering the dowels in, if anything, you would want to leave them slightly above. I'm talking like a 30-second, if at all. If you can get them perfectly flush, that's fine, but you don't want to go too much with them because you'll never get them back out. And brass is a nice soft metal, so it's easy to sand down if you leave them slightly high. And here I am just kind of getting them nice and perfectly flush. I just feel it and then just sand away whatever needs to be sanded. And then do one final sanding on the entire table as it's all assembled and you're ready to put the coating of your choice on it. On this one, I chose a hard wax finish, Rubio Monocoat. It was natural, and it gives you a little bit of a white tone to it, and I think it turned out nice. I try to experiment with all their different colors just to see what they look like. I've never used this one before. And on the bottom, I put the cutting board feet that I've used on a bunch of projects, and it just gives it that little bit of a high-end finished look, and it matches nice with the brass dowels that went into the top. And here are some closing shots of the finished product. The nice brass dowel pins at the top give it a good little contrast, which I think turned out beautiful. And to me, the wide planks give it that nice grain look. And it's pretty interesting that you're able to do this out of one 9-foot board.